Imagine waking up tomorrow morning, opening your wallet, looking at every dollar inside, and realizing it had become completely worthless overnight. Not because it was counterfeit, not because someone stole it, but because everyone simply stopped believing it had value. It sounds impossible. After all, money feels like one of the most real things in our lives. We spend it every day. We work years to earn it. We save it, invest it, fight over it, even judge success by it. Yet here's the strange truth. The paper inside your wallet, the numbers in your bank account, and even the balance on your phone have almost no value on their own. They're valuable only because billions of people agree they are. Money isn't built on paper. It isn't built on gold. It's built on something far more fragile. Trust. And for thousands of years, civilizations have risen, prospered, and collapsed because they either understood that truth or forgot it. This is the story of the greatest invention in financial history, an invention that transformed tiny villages into global economies, built empires, started wars, created billionaires, destroyed nations, and today controls almost every decision we make. But to understand why a simple piece of paper can buy a house, or why a few numbers on a screen can represent millions of dollars, we have to travel back thousands of years to a world where money didn't exist at all, before banks, before coins, before paper, before anyone had ever heard the word dollar. Life looked very different. Imagine you're a farmer nearly 4,000 years ago. Your family grows wheat. Your neighbor raises goats. Another village produces pottery. Someone else makes tools from bronze. At first, trading seems simple. You have wheat. Someone else has goats. You exchange. Everyone wins. But as communities grew larger, trade became far more complicated. What if the goat owner didn't need wheat today? What if the blacksmith wanted salt instead? What if the value of one goat didn't equal the value of 10 bags of grain? Trade slowed down. Arguments became common. Economic growth became limited. People needed something that everyone would accept, even if they didn't immediately need the goods being offered. Across different civilizations, different solutions appeared. Some societies used shells. Others used salt, livestock, copper, silver. Every culture experimented in its own way. But each of these systems shared the same weakness. They depended on physical goods that were often difficult to divide, transport, or verify. Then, around the 7th century BC, in the ancient kingdom of Lydia, located in what is now Western Turkey, history quietly changed forever. For the first time, a government began producing standardized metal coins made from electrum, a naturally occurring mixture of gold and silver. Every coin carried an official stamp. That small symbol meant something revolutionary. People no longer needed to weigh metal or argue about purity during every transaction. The government had already done it for them. For the first time, trust became portable. Trade accelerated. Markets expanded. Cities grew. Empires became wealthier. Money wasn't just making commerce easier. It was changing civilization itself. But even coins had a problem. As economies expanded, people needed more of them. A merchant traveling hundreds of miles might have to carry sacks containing thousands of heavy copper coins. Large transactions became exhausting. Some historical records from China describe merchants transporting money so heavy that moving it required carts or pack animals. Imagine carrying your entire business savings, not in your pocket, but behind a horse. The system worked, but it wasn't built for a rapidly growing economy. And that problem would lead to one of the greatest financial breakthroughs in human history. Around the 10th century, during China's Song dynasty, merchants in the province of Sichuan found a smarter solution. Instead of carrying mountains of metal coins, they left their coins with trusted deposit shops. In return, they received paper certificates promising that the coins could be collected later. Those certificates became known as jiaozi. At first, they weren't created by the government. They were issued by private merchants. But something remarkable happened. People began accepting the paper itself as payment. Not because the paper had value, because they trusted the promise behind it. For the first time in history, money had become lighter than metal. Imagine living in that moment. For centuries, Wealth had weight. You could hear it. You could feel it. Then suddenly, your fortune could fit inside a single sheet of paper. It must have felt almost magical. The Song government quickly recognized the power of this invention. Eventually, it took control of issuing paper money, creating one of the world's earliest systems of state-backed currency. Trade expanded even faster. Merchants could travel farther. Businesses grew. Entire regions became more connected than ever before. It seemed like one of humanity's greatest economic breakthroughs. And it was. But hidden inside this revolutionary invention was a danger that almost nobody fully understood. Because once governments discovered they could create money from paper instead of precious metals, a new temptation appeared. If printing a little money helped the economy, why not print a little more? That single question would change the course of financial history. And over the next 1,000 years, it would trigger economic booms, financial disasters, political revolutions, and one lesson that every modern economy is still trying to learn. At first, paper money felt like a miracle. Merchants could travel farther. Trade became faster. Entire economies expanded. What had once required wagons filled with heavy coins could now fit inside a simple pouch. For governments, it looked like the perfect invention. No more expensive minting. No more transporting tons of metal. No dependence on limited supplies of gold or silver. Just paper, backed by trust. And for a while, it worked. The Song dynasty experienced remarkable commercial growth. Markets expanded across China. Trade routes became busier than ever before. Paper money helped connect one of the world's largest economies in ways that metal coins never could. But every revolutionary invention carries a hidden temptation. The printing press didn't only spread knowledge. It also spread propaganda. The internet didn't only connect people. It also spread misinformation. And paper money didn't only make economies stronger. It gave governments something previous civilizations had never truly possessed. The ability to create money far more easily than ever before. At first, new notes were issued carefully. Each one represented a promise, a claim on real value. But promises are easy to make, especially when printing another sheet of paper seems much easier than collecting more gold or raising more taxes. Slowly, that discipline began to disappear. As different Chinese dynasties faced wars, political instability, and growing government expenses, the temptation became impossible to resist. More money entered circulation, then more, and then even more. At first, almost nobody noticed. People continued buying food. Merchants continued trading. Markets still looked normal. But something invisible had already begun to change. The value of every existing note was quietly shrinking. Because money doesn't become more valuable simply because there's more of it. If the amount of goods in an economy stays relatively similar, while the amount of money keeps increasing, each individual note gradually buys less than before. Today, economists call this inflation. But centuries ago, people didn't need an economics textbook to understand what was happening. They noticed it in the marketplace. Yesterday's money no longer bought today's goods. Families needed more notes to purchase the same bag of rice. Merchants raised prices to protect themselves. Workers demanded higher wages. Trust, the invisible foundation of paper money, began to weaken. And once people start questioning the value of money, they don't simply lose confidence in paper. They begin losing confidence in the entire financial system behind it. History would repeat this lesson again, and again, and again. But perhaps nowhere was it repeated more dramatically than in 18th century France. Imagine walking through the streets of Paris in the early 1700s. France was drowning in debt. Years of expensive wars and royal spending had emptied the treasury. Gold and silver were scarce. The economy was struggling. Then came a man who believed he had discovered the perfect solution. His name was John Law, a brilliant Scottish economist, a gambler, a financial visionary, and, depending on who you ask, either one of history's greatest innovators or one of its most dangerous dreamers. Law believed France's biggest problem wasn't a lack of wealth. It was a lack of money moving through the economy. His solution seemed simple. Create more paper money, increase lending, encourage investment, and economic growth would follow. At first, it looked like genius. His bank issued paper notes. Confidence returned. Businesses expanded. Investors rushed into the market. Then came the Mississippi Company. Law convinced thousands of ordinary people that France's overseas territories, especially Louisiana, held unimaginable wealth waiting to be unlocked. Shares exploded in value. People borrowed money to buy more shares. Families invested their life savings. Fortunes appeared almost overnight. Paris became consumed by speculation. Everyone believed prices would continue rising forever. If that sounds familiar, it should. History doesn't repeat itself perfectly, but human psychology often does. Because whether it's tulips, railroads, Dogecoin stocks, cryptocurrency, or artificial intelligence, the pattern rarely changes. People stop asking, what is this actually worth? And begin asking only one question. How much higher can it go? For a brief moment, John Law looked like the man who had solved economics itself. But underneath the excitement, the same invisible crack that had once appeared in China was growing again. The system depended on one fragile assumption, that people would continue believing. And history has shown, belief is the easiest thing to create during a boom, and the hardest thing to protect during a panic. Then, confidence broke. People rushed to exchange paper notes for real gold and silver. The bank couldn't meet every demand. Prices collapsed. Fortunes disappeared. The Mississippi bubble burst. John Law fled France in disgrace. And once again, the world discovered a painful lesson. Money can be printed. Trust cannot. From China to France, the pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. Whenever governments or financial institutions forgot that simple truth, the consequences reached far beyond markets. They changed the course of history itself. But perhaps the greatest test of that lesson was still to come. Across the Atlantic, a brand new nation was about to discover just how expensive broken trust could become. By the late 18th century, the world had already learned one painful lesson. Paper money could unlock extraordinary economic growth. But if people stopped believing in it, it could collapse just as quickly. History was about to repeat itself. This time, on the other side of the Atlantic. In 1775, the American colonies entered the Revolutionary War against Great Britain. Wars are expensive. Armies need weapons. Soldiers need food. Governments need money. But the Continental Congress faced a problem. It had no reliable way to raise enough taxes, and very little gold or silver to finance a long war. So it turned to the same solution other governments had discovered centuries earlier. It printed paper money. These notes became known as the Continental Dollar. At first, they helped fund the revolution. But as the war dragged on, more and more notes were printed. Confidence weakened. Prices rose rapidly. The value of the currency collapsed. Eventually, the phrase, "not worth a continental," entered everyday language. It became a symbol of something completely worthless. For many Americans, it was another reminder that paper money alone could never guarantee trust. That experience left a lasting scar. For decades, many governments remained deeply cautious about paper currency. They wanted something people could believe in, something that couldn't simply be created with ink and paper. That something was gold. Throughout the 19th century, more countries gradually adopted the gold standard. Under this system, the value of a country's currency was tied to a specific amount of gold. The idea was simple. If every dollar represented a claim on a fixed quantity of gold, governments couldn't create unlimited money whenever they wanted. Gold became more than a precious metal. It became a promise that money had real limits. For decades, that promise helped create confidence in international trade. Merchants could do business across borders knowing that currencies were linked, directly or indirectly, to something with globally recognized value. The system wasn't perfect. Economic growth was sometimes constrained. Financial crises still occurred. But compared with many earlier experiments, Gold gave people something they desperately wanted: predictability. Then came the 20th century. 2 world wars, the Great Depression, and massive government spending placed enormous pressure on the global financial system. After World War II, world leaders gathered in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, in 1944 to design a new international monetary order. The agreement they reached reshaped global finance. Instead of every major currency being directly linked to gold, most countries tied their currencies to the US dollar. And the US dollar, in turn, remained convertible into gold for foreign governments at a fixed rate of $35 per ounce. For a time, the system worked remarkably well. The US economy was strong. International trade expanded. The dollar became the center of global finance. But beneath the surface, a familiar problem was growing. As the years passed, the United States spent heavily on overseas military commitments and domestic programs. More dollars circulated around the world. Yet America's gold reserves were not growing at the same pace. Gradually, foreign governments began asking an uncomfortable question. Did the United States actually have enough gold to back all those dollars? Some countries started exchanging their dollars for gold. America's gold reserves declined. Pressure mounted. The system was reaching its limit. Then, on the evening of August 15, 1971, President Richard Nixon addressed the American people on national television. His announcement lasted only a few minutes, but it changed the global financial system forever. The United States would suspend the dollar's convertibility into gold for foreign governments. In practical terms, the last formal link between the US dollar and gold had been broken. The decision became known as the Nixon Shock. The Bretton Woods system soon came to an end. For the first time in modern history, the world's largest economy was no longer anchored to gold. From that moment forward, the value of money depended more than ever on something that couldn't be mined, stored, or weighed. Confidence, trust, the credibility of governments, the strength of central banks, the belief that tomorrow, everyone would still accept the same pieces of paper and the same numbers on a screen. Without realizing it, the world had entered an entirely new monetary era, an era we are still living in today. But that raises one final question. If money is no longer backed by gold, then what exactly gives it value? The answer is far more fascinating than most people realize. For thousands of years, humanity searched for the perfect form of money. We tried shells, salt, silver, gold, paper, and now, digital numbers stored inside computers. The materials changed. The technology changed. Even entire financial systems came and went. But one thing never changed: trust. Think about the money you use today. Maybe you bought coffee with your phone, paid a bill online, transferred money to a friend, or received your salary through direct deposit. At no point did you ask to see a bar of gold. You never demanded a government vault be opened. You didn't need to, because the modern financial system runs on a shared belief. The belief that everyone else will continue accepting the same money tomorrow. That's what economists call fiat currency. Modern money has value, not because it can be exchanged for gold, but because governments declare it legal tender. Central banks work to preserve confidence and price stability, and millions of people accept it in exchange for goods and services every single day. The paper itself is almost worthless. The trust behind it is priceless. And that's where many people misunderstand money. They think wealth comes from printing more currency. History tells a very different story. China tried it. France tried it. America experienced its own paper currency crisis during the Revolution. Time after time, the lesson remained the same. Printing more money can create more pieces of paper. It cannot create more real wealth. Real wealth comes from people creating value, from businesses producing goods, from workers developing skills, from innovation, from productivity. Money is only the language we use to measure that value, not the value itself. And perhaps that's the biggest financial lesson history has to offer. Behavioral economists have spent decades studying how people think about money. One conclusion appears again and again. Money influences decisions not because of what it is, but because of what we believe it represents. Security, freedom, opportunity, status, hope, fear. Those emotions shape markets every single day. People don't always buy because prices are rising. Sometimes they buy because everyone else is buying. They don't always sell because an investment has become worthless. Sometimes they sell because everyone else is running for the exit. The financial system is built as much on psychology as it is on mathematics. That's why bubbles form. That's why bank runs happen. That's why markets sometimes become irrational. The numbers may change. Human behavior rarely does. Now think back to every chapter of this story. The merchants of Song Dynasty China accepted paper because they trusted the promise behind it. The investors in John Law's France believed prices could only rise. The Continental Dollar collapsed when confidence disappeared. The gold standard gave people certainty because they trusted gold. Bretton Woods relied on confidence in the US dollar. And when that link to gold ended in 1971, the world didn't stop using money. It simply transferred its trust from precious metal to institutions. Today, that trust rests on governments, central banks, financial laws, and perhaps most importantly, on the belief that millions of strangers will continue honoring the same system tomorrow morning. It's an extraordinary idea when you really think about it. Every day, billions of people who have never met each other exchange goods, services, and years of hard work, using pieces of paper and digital numbers that only have value because everyone believes they do. That may be the greatest act of collective cooperation in human history. But it also comes with responsibility, because trust is incredibly difficult to build and remarkably easy to lose. History proves that. From the markets of ancient China to the streets of Paris to the financial crises of the modern world, the strongest economies weren't always the ones with the most gold. They were the ones that protected confidence the longest. So the next time you look at a dollar bill or check the balance in your banking app, remember something. You're not looking at wealth. You're looking at a promise shared by millions of people, a promise that only survives as long as society continues believing in it. That is what money really is. Not paper, not gold, not numbers. Trust. And perhaps that's the most valuable thing humanity has ever created. If this documentary changed the way you think about money, tell us in the comments. What surprised you the most about the history of money? And if you know someone who thinks money has always worked the way it does today, share this documentary with them. Because understanding money isn't just about becoming wealthier. It's about understanding one of the most powerful ideas ever created by human civilization. This is Money Elevate, where we don't just explain finance. We uncover the invisible forces that shape the world. I'll see you in the next documentary.